Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday. This week with us is Sara Caldwell. Hey, Sara. Welcome back.
Hi. Happy Tuesday.
Absolutely. Happy Tuesday, everybody. And of course, Team Tuesday here on the podcast. Elsewhere, it might be Taco Tuesday, but for us, it is Team Tuesday. We'll talk about teams in a second. But first, Sara, share with us, what was the book that most inspired you in your career as a Scrum Master?
So for anybody who knows me, they know I'm a big nerd. So this question was incredibly hard for me to narrow it down to one. So I have three, if that's okay. And so one book that I really like about the way that processing our operating system and understanding a little bit more about that system dynamic that we were talking about yesterday is Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan. I think I'm mispronouncing that, but his book is great. It's called Brave New Work. And he really talks about how we don't need to install a new operating system and that we need to appreciate some of the system dynamics. So two favorite quotes from that book are, you can't blow up bureaucracy with bureaucracy. And we want to be people positive and complexity conscious.
That's a huge, people positive and complexity conscious. That, oh my God, that for me, that's a huge recommendation for the book. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's something to really noodle on and spend some time. I like to oftentimes spend some walks really thinking about what that means to me and the organizations that I work with. And the next one, we talked about on yesterday related to leadership and how they can fit into this new world where the team is doing the thinking and the doing. And to really appreciate that and to help leaders and teams that I coach and teams that I'm working with I really like Leadership is Language by David Marquet. Often people know him as the submarine guy. In the videos where he changed the worst submarine fleet to the best submarine fleet using his leadership approaches. It's intent-based leadership.
Yeah, David's been a guest on the podcast, so check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to check those out.
He is fantastic. His work is fantastic. And what I love about this book is that it really gives some concrete actions for leaders to do as opposed to theory of you're not part of the team, right? Chicken and egg and all these things that are that are directionally accurate, but not as concrete and tangible as David makes it in the books that he has written. And the last one is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. There's so many relatable anecdotes here, especially for somebody like myself who is a direct communicator. And it really has helped me be an overall better leader, servant leader. Even, she specifically talks a lot about how to be a boss and be a better leader for better humans. But there are so many points that I have taken away and utilized in my Scrum Mastering and Agile journey.
Yeah, and that's a great recommendation as well, right? Like a book that can directly affect how you practice your role as a Scrum Master is a great recommendation. So thank you for sharing those three books. We were hoping for one, but we got three. I guess we can call this a bonus episode already. But of course, Tuesday is also Team Tuesday, and we want to explore a story of a team. Tell us a little bit about the context, what was going on, how big was the team, maybe how big was the project, and then walk us through how those small little behaviors kind of developed over time and eventually became a problem for the team.
Yeah, so I was working for a managed healthcare company, and we were hoping to be able to, at least the story we were telling the team is that we were wanting to leverage technology to really shift patient care managers from writing these handwritten notes on paper into an electronic device. And the reason behind that is that, healthcare data is one of the most lucrative data out there. And if we have all these individual pieces of paper with some potential PHI on it, our care manager could get into a car accident because they're going from house to house. And all these papers could be with PHI flying all over the highway, right? And so we wanted to solve that risk. We wanted to secure our patient data. And we brought that problem to a group of engineers roughly, I think at the beginning it was probably about 4 people, but through the project it grew to about 3 different teams. And so engineers did what they're really born to do, use technology to solve problems. And so they created an iPad that the care managers could use to capture notes. And like bada boom, bada bing, no more paper, right? Only patient information is secured on only information is stored on a secured device. But after like the first couple of pilots were released, adoption was struggling and the team really just couldn't figure out what was going on. And the feedback that they were receiving was like brushed aside. Like they just need to learn how to use the tool. That's a user problem. They need to read the manual. And that struck me by surprise. But then like I started thinking about it and realized like the engineers had never met a care manager. Like they didn't know anything about the persona or the characteristics. They didn't know that these people were not tech savvy people, and that the average age was 46, which like it was way more relevant back in the day, especially as I'm approaching 46. And they didn't appreciate that most care managers didn't have like the latest phone, right? They were actually using flip phones. They didn't really, realize that nobody was enabling or encouraging them or exploring to them, how to use this tool. They were just kind of giving it to them. And so the engineers were kind of forced to design a product for themselves to solve the problem. But as we know, like what we know about user experience and or UX, we know that we aren't our users. So, you might be wondering, well, how is this related to like a potential team dynamic or self-destructive behavior? Before I answer that, I really want to answer that, I'm a firm believer that there are no bad people, only bad systems. And the system didn't allow for them to have space to like really get curious about who they were designing for. And the team also didn't get curious about who they were designing for. And I think that ultimately was, some self-destructive behavior, because what they were doing is creating a product in a vacuum, not really appreciate who they were creating it for, and then getting frustrated when the person that they created for it wasn't using it and kind of blaming them. And it ends up kind of being like, a cycle that we go through. But how we got out of that was we got a few passionate team members, a few passionate engineers to do a ride along with the care manager. So like, Gemma, right?
So they were kind of shadowing the care workers.
Exactly. Spending a day with them. And that was just a complete shift in perspective for not only that individual, but the team. Because what ended up happening was so neat is that they would come like during our design sessions, our refinement sessions, when we'd have some kind of at a stalemate about what to do, what decisions, somebody, the person who went on the ride along would usually say, well, when I was on a ride along with Carol, and these conversations would come up, and now suddenly those care managers were like in our refinement sessions. They were in our sprint planning sessions. They were there with us as we were creating the product.
This is so beautiful, because this is kind of what I mean, when we talk about product design these days, most people who read and study the aspects that relate to understanding the user would immediately say, hey, just go for a ride along, or, shadow the user, or at least interview the user, or show them some paper prototypes, whatever, interact with the user in whatever way you can. And but this wasn't always the case. In fact, you are a project manager by training. I'm also a project manager by training. One of the things we learned early on with project was that somebody wrote the requirements and somebody else implemented them. That makes it impossible to even get close to understanding who the users are. But when that happens, when the engineers are allowed to interact directly with the users, this huge shift in perspective happens. And the story you just shared is such a beautiful example of how a team was going to self-destruct, maybe destroying the product first, but eventually the team as well. And that ride along kind of transformed their perspective and brought the users to the critical planning and design conversations they were going to have while developing the product.
Exactly, 100%. Nobody likes to spend a lot of their time and energy creating something that nobody uses. And yet sometimes we have systems that enable that. and that sort of outcome. And oftentimes I hear people say, well, we don't have time, we need hands on keyboard, I got to get this story done, I got to get real work done. And the challenge I see with that is the opportunity cost of just spending a day with your user. It can actually create more understanding, less documentation, less meetings. It actually eliminates some coordination costs and waste within the system when we do that. So if any leader out there is curious about this and thinking, I wonder if I can do that, it's definitely worth an experiment, and I know it will pay dividends. You will see that one experience be talked about for months, if not years.
Absolutely. It's something that changes the team's perspective for sure. Thank you for sharing that story, Sara.
Thank you.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.